Hey everyone, it's Jesse Green, your friend and colleague, and you're listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is terrific to have your company for an episode of the show. Now today I want to talk to you about a topic that I feel is incredibly important as you go about growing and scaling your practice, but it's a topic that no one ever talks about. But if you get this right, it's going to unlock the key to your growth. It's going to unlock the key to being able to level up, scale up, and achieve the practice of your dreams. The topic I really want to talk about is that of identity. And one of the observations I've made over the years is that we always act in accordance with our identity. How we see ourselves is how we show up in the world. Now, sometimes you might see that with people who have either a really positive self-image or a negative self-image, but it goes beyond that kind of positive or negative self-image. It comes back to how we see ourselves in various roles. If you see yourself as a great parent, a mother or father, you'll often show up as a great mother or father. If you see yourselves as a dentist, you're going to show up as a dentist. If you see yourself as a business owner, you're going to show up as a business owner. Now, the reason this is really important is because it's worthwhile understanding where and how our identity is formed. And if you think of the identity as a bit like an iceberg, what you see above the water are our behaviors, our actions, our desires, all those sorts of things, the decisions that we make. And what you'll see then is a series of results. And if you look at that be, do, have model, it's the what we do and what we have as a result of that is the bit above the water, the part of the iceberg that you see. But lying beneath the water are our skills, our beliefs, our values, including our identity. And it's the identity piece I want to just talk about for a moment. Because we always show up how we see ourselves, it's really important that we have the right identity to take us to where we want to get to. Where this becomes a problem is when people want to grow and scale their practice. So if we think about this for a moment, there's really very clear growth stages of any business, and it's the same in dentistry. Typically, you've got your startup phase, you've got your growth phase where you're really focusing on developing profitability and robust financials. Then once you've got that in place, typically the business owner will want to create some time through leverage, which means they've got to learn to be able to work with and through other people. And then finally, there's an exit stage where from the business owner's point of view, you're trying to maximize the value. Now, all of these stages require an identity shift. In the early days, your identity might shift from being an associate to being a practice owner. But let me give you another example of an identity shift where oftentimes dentists come unstuck. Then I'll talk to you about an example where people really don't think about, but it is just as important. Where I see dentists struggling with identity is often at the end of their career. And when you've been a dentist for 30, 40 years, you've been doing the do, you're Dr. So-and-so, you're top of the crop, all those sorts of things, to step away from that role, which comes with significance, it comes with importance, it comes with meaning, it comes with contribution, all of those sorts of things, how we add value to the world, to step away from that, your identity shifts to being a retiree. And a lot of dentists struggle with that transition into retirement. And so what we notice then is they've got to take on a new identity. They've got to find a reason to shift that identity. Now, again, you're probably familiar with dentists who have struggled with retirement and giving up that identity of being a dentist. And we've all probably seen it. But what I really want to talk about today is while you're still in your career, what are the identity shifts that need to happen for you to be able to grow and scale your practice and why that can be challenging? It's really interesting to kind of understand that, as I said, for each of these different stages of growth, there's a different identity shift that occurs. Now, if you've got a practice that is growing, typically the way a practice initially grows is through your own personal exertion. And that means you're sitting in the chair from 8:30 to 5, you're doing your dentistry, you're running your business in and around the clinical work, but the clinical work takes priority because that's how you generate your revenue. In that scenario, you are very much in the clinician identity. I'm a dentist, I'm a clinician. How I bring value to the business is through the work that I do with my two hands. Now, that's great, and many people will sit in their whole career in that identity. And as I said, they get to the end of their career, and that's where the identity shift can be a struggle. But the other place it struggles is if you want to then go from growing your practice to scaling your practice, because that shift in business model involves trading your time for money. You have money or time. When you go to scale up, you need to be able to create leverage, and that leverage comes by working with and through other people where you're now creating money and time. And so what that means is it's like a gear shift in a car. If you're going to scale your practice, it's like driving down the highway in second gear. You can't keep driving forever and ever without the engine burning out. If you try and scale your practice by maintaining a full clinical workload 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 8 to 5, at some point you're going to hit the wall and burn out. So in order to scale, in order to be able to work with and through other people, your identity needs to shift from being the clinician, wearing the clinician hat, to being able to put on the business owner hat, where I now develop, train other people who can do that work for me. And so what happens, though, is that can make intellectual sense. We all kind of understand that. But at an emotional level, it can be quite challenging, because oftentimes we've spent years believing that the value that we bring to the business is through the work that we do with our hands, the clinical dentistry. And to step away from that, even though we know rationally that we should take some time away from the chair and use that time to train and develop our other people, that can create a bit of a challenge internally for us. And unless we've made that internal change, we're going to always struggle and go back to what we know. So let me give you another metaphor. I'm going to mix my metaphors a little bit here for a moment, but bear with me. Oftentimes, going from a profitable practice to a scalable practice is like trying to run from first base to second base in baseball. The problem that most people have is they try to get to second base while keeping a foot still on first base. And of course, you end up stretching yourself so thin until you break. At some point, you're going to need to commit to that shift through to second base. You're going to need to leave first base and run hard to second. But what happens is, while you're in between bases, when you're in that messy middle stage, it's uncertain and it's challenging. And what most practice owners do is they run back to first base. They run back to what they know. They run back to what they're comfortable with. And dare I say, they run back to the identity that they have for themselves. And that is that of clinician. To be able to make the transition through to second base, to be able to run through and have a scalable practice, you need to be able to try on the new hat as business owner. You need to be able to adopt that identity for at least some of the day. Now, again, intellectually, that makes perfect sense. But what I'll share with you is trying to solve business problems with a clinician identity doesn't always work. And so my observation is, for the practice owners that we've worked with lots of practices who have been able to scale up very successfully, is all of them at some point go through an identity shift. All of them make that mental or internal change, and then they can make the external changes. And it's the internal change that comes first before the external change, because you've got to work on what's beneath the water in terms of the iceberg, right? It's the identity, the values, the beliefs, the skills, all the rest of it. But in particular here, we've got to work on that identity. So how do you shift identity? How do you consciously shift that identity? Well, it takes practice. It's like building a muscle. You've got to be able to get familiar with it. It doesn't happen overnight. You've got to be able to work through that process. So let me give you a couple of thoughts around how to shift identity. The things I've had to do, the things my clients have had to do, and the things that, dare I say, if you want to go and scale your practice, you're going to have to do too. So the first thing I'm going to say is inspired by one of our podcast guests, Robert Hamilton Owens. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Robert many times since that podcast. And he's a great guy. And I'd really encourage you, if you've not seen any of his work, just check it out. Robert talks about actually changing hats. So when he was running his business, he had a series of hats, like physical hats, that he had on a hat rack behind him. And when he was doing a particular task, he took out the hat required for that particular task. And it was a mental cue to remind him to adopt that perspective of thinking. And so if he was putting on his CEO hat, he'd get out his CEO hat. If he put on his friend hat, he'd put on his friend hat. And so he was telling the story to me that he had a person working with him who was a friend, and he'd given this particular workmate and friend some instructions about how he wanted some work to be done. And he gave a very, very clear direction about what could go wrong if it's not done the right way. And of course, for one reason or another, that friend went out and did the work but didn't follow Robert's instructions, and it ended up going sideways. And so when they came back and they debriefed, Robert said, putting his friend out, as your friend, I love you, I care for you, I'm for you, I want the best for you. But as I put on my CEO hat, which he then changes hats, you really made a boo-boo. You made a big mistake that's compromised this particular project. And for that reason, I'm now going to have to let you go. And so he was able to shift his thinking by literally shifting hats. So again, maybe that's something that you can do to help you get used to shifting your perspective, shifting the role that you wear. We all wear different hats in our life. We all have different roles that we take on: parent, father, son, mother, daughter, whatever it is. And so you can shift your perspective by changing the hats. Now, the other way that a lot of people find is useful to shift their identity is using affirmations and mantras. The I am statements. I am a business owner, I am a this, I am a whatever, and repeating them over and over and over for an extended period of time until they become internalized. It's a really important thing to be able to figure out how you shift your identity, because here's the key, is if you want to have a business that is scaled, if you want to have a business that is successful in the commercial sense, you need to adopt the identity that is appropriate for that outcome. You're not going to create the success. You're not going to create the outward results if you don't have the internal identity that is congruent with that, because we all act in accordance with how we see ourselves. We all act congruently with our identity. For better or for worse, it's what we do. It's how we're human, and we don't want to fight human nature. We want to work with it, but you've got to be able to shift that identity to align with the goals you have for yourself. So I hope you find that exercise useful, and I look forward to seeing you for another episode of the Savvy Dentist Podcast. Bye for now. Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.